Oh, marvelous.
Okay. Today is Wednesday, October 13th, 2004, and my name is Kathy Bernstein. I'm visiting with Harriet Perchonok, who is a volunteer with the Milwaukee Jewish Historical Society, and as part of our celebration of 350 years of Jewish life in America, the Historical Society is conducting community-wide interviews. And I want to thank you, Harriet, for volunteering today, and I know you will next week, and also for taking the time to visit with us so we can learn a little bit more about who you are and save that for the future. So let's start right at the beginning.
Right.
We've got these questions here, and I'd like to know what your full name is, and was it always Perchonok? Does that name mean anything?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us your name.
You're starting with an excellent first question. My full name is Harriet Elaine Perchonok, and that is my name. The family story goes that the name was Cohn in Europe, my father's family. They were Kohanim, Cohn.
Kohen.
Okay. And Jews, the Jewish people, were conscripted into the Tsar's army, not for just a few years, but for 20 years. So the family changed it to another Slavic, Polish type name in order to avoid the Tsar's conscription, and that was Perchonok.
What does that mean in Polish? Is it just a Polish name or a Russian Slavic name?
You know,
don't you know? I don't know.
During the exhibit we had here of the Polish paintings at the Art Institute, a man asked me about that, a Polish man. I have forgotten what he told me it meant, but evidently it has some meaning.
I hope it's a good
Polish.
Yeah.
I'm kidded. When I was a kid, I was kidded a lot.
Really?
Hakachinik
Oh, okay. Right.
in Yiddish.
When and where were you born, Harriet?
I was born February 5th, 1928, right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And your parents, who were the first members of your family to settle here? And how did they make a living? Who came here?
I do have a bit of a hearing deficit.
Okay.
I didn't hear the first question.
All right. Who were the first family members to settle in America?
Milwaukee.
Who came to America first?
America.
And why did they choose Milwaukee? Sort of we're coming from Europe, and when was that?
I hear you. You know, I don't know why they chose Milwaukee, but my father and I believe two of his brothers came together, and eventually there were 7 brothers and sisters all together, in addition to my grandparents, who all settled in Milwaukee. And they were known as a close-knit family, actually.
What did your father do for a living? And what was your mother's maiden name?
My mother's maiden name was Cooper, Kooper. My father had come in 1906 with some of the big upheavals in Russia.
Sure.
My mother came between the First World War and the Russian Revolution. And much later, teenager, she came with one of her sisters and a sister's child. The sister's husband was already in the United States, usual story, and had sent, and that's why they came to Milwaukee.
Cooper, what was that name before? Sometimes Coopers are Cohens too, you know.
I have no idea.
You know. So your mother came later. Did she speak Yiddish, Russian?
She spoke Yiddish,
Mm-hmm.
yes. My parents spoke to me in Yiddish, and I answered in English.
Mm-hmm.
My brother only spoke Yiddish. My brother, who was 7 years older than I, only spoke Yiddish
Mm-hmm.
when he first started public school.
Mm-hmm.
No accent, you would never know.
Uh-huh.
When I was in college, I know I'm rushing ahead, my parents wrote me in Yiddish.
Oh, that's interesting. So your mother came here. Your father came in 1906?
Yes.
Okay. And so how did they meet?
Well, did you want to know about my father's business?
Yes,
Because it was
okay.
it was a
Okay.
family business.
Oh, absolutely.
It was.
If I'm forgetting something, you just
Yeah.
go ahead.
It was Frank Perchonok
Mm-hmm.
and Sons, and it was located on 9th and Walnut Street.
What was it?
And in the beginning, they serviced peddlers. Peddlers had horses and wagons.
Oh, that's interesting. And so what kind of service did they provide?
Well, you know, I'm really not sure.
I mean, did they provide the horse, the wagon, the goods, repair? I'm wondering.
Repair. It was the repair, yeah.
Repair
And the
aspect.
repair and possibly the feed, that kind of thing.
I see. Did they have stables for the horses?
Not that I'm aware of,
Uh-huh. Do you have pictures?
because as I got older, the business evolved. The business changed
Into?
into the coal business.
I love that. What a connection.
You know, we were right across the street from the Columbia Theater. That was a Jewish and or developing African-American neighborhood
Uh-huh.
at that time. And at that time, I felt free to walk around that neighborhood.
Mhm.
My two aunts lived on 12th Street,
Mhm.
which was very close.
Tell me,
to-
tell me again, where was the business?
The business was on 9th and Walnut.
Nice and long. Okay.
And when I came back to visit in Milwaukee, a friend of mine took me for a drive down Walnut Street. She had to drive me down back and forth. I think I insisted on 3 times. I couldn't believe it. The
Mhm.
whole neighborhood
It was different. Mhm.
was gone,
Mm.
was gone.
Well, Mount
That
Sinai
was-
Hospital was right there, though. Was it there when you were born, or had they already moved? Because Mount Sinai
That I
Hospital's
really
on
don't
6th
know.
and 4th or
But
6th.
our temples were there.
Mhm.
My Hebrew school was there.
Mhm.
My 2 aunts were there. My
Mhm.
dad's shop was there.
Mhm.
And as a child, I would wander
Sure.
from Walnut Street to 12. Unfortunately, we don't do that anymore.
Right, right. So we're talking about they created Frank Perchonok and Sons. They serviced peddlers. I love that.
Yes,
And then it changed to a coal.
yes. And then when it went, I think we went, what was it, natural gas or oil? Anyway, the coal business sort of faded. They went into paper excelsior,
What
which
does
is
that mean?
it's packing paper. They take newspaper.
Right.
Remember
Shred it and
when we
shred
got goods, they were shredded.
Sure.
We didn't have the bubbles.
Right,
yet.
right. Sure. So they really were clever, weren't they? They took this and changed it to this and then that.
Yes. Also, in terms of how families function in those days, my dad's youngest sister, Minnie, lost her husband.
Mhm.
He was Bill Apple. He is related to the Apples that you hear about
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
Perhaps Billy Apple is
Maybe named after him. Mhm.
Bill had a simple automobile accident of some kind. And anyway, he died.
Mhm.
He was late 20s, early 30s. And her brothers took her in as a secretary at the business. see. And the families lived close together.
Sure, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, you were all.
Very close, very
and you
close.
took care of your own. You gave her a job to give her a wage. Did she have kids?
Yes,
Sure.
Lawrence.
Uh-huh.
Lawrence Apple.
Uh-huh.
She had one son. They had one son.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
Very.
that's a comforting life, a close life. They probably had no friends other than maybe somebody at synagogue, but the family were the friends. I've heard this before. Is that true for your family?
Probably
Cousins
before their
clubs,
marriages.
Cousins clubs, things like that. I've heard
Yes.
a lot of.
Oh. Yes, we were related to the Horowitzes. In that way, we were related to Gertie Switchko, Rabbi Switchko's wife, and from Bethel, and the Horowitzes also, and we'd have visits, we'd have picnics, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget their bringing casseroles to Lake Park.
Mm-hmm. And Lake Park. So
Real food, not
Right.
just sandwiches.
Right, picnics in Lake Park. And did the men play pinochle and things like that or not?
You know, I really don't remember. My parents were Polizionists or Labor Zionists. They were more of a socialistic bent,
Mm-hmm.
not of a communistic bent.
Mm-hmm.
But Milwaukee was a socialist city.
Yes, it was.
We subscribed to the leader. We had Mayor Horn. It was a working man's city.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really has been part of my birthright. My parents were not religious, although we went to the Anshe Lubavitch Shul, which was on, I think it was Cherry Street. It was right around
There were so many of them.
that area, yeah. And the reason we went there was because my grandparents went there.
Sure.
And we
Mhm.
went and we sat. And I remember the women, we sat upstairs. And I remember the women with the lemons on Yom Kippur.
Oh, so they wouldn't faint or something? Mm-hmm.
They were fasting.
Mhm.
They
Sure.
were really fasting. No air conditioning.
Of course. Of course.
And it was so colorful. It was so colorful. I remember the first time I went to Bethel, conservative.
Let's see.
It was drab.
Interesting.
It didn't have the drama and the
Mhm.
color and but it had
Right.
it had other things.
Yes, it did.
It had other things.
Yes, it did.
Yes. And my mother's two sisters kept kashrut, kept kosher. Some of my Perchonok aunts also.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't. But your mom didn't.
Yes, well, in a way she did. And some of it was traditional or customary. She went to the kosher butcher shop.
Uh-huh. It seems everybody did. Did you have separate dishes?
No.
No. But she
no.
bought kosher meat.
Oh, yes.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. Were you happy to be Jewish? I mean, was this a good thing for you?
I thought so. I had a very good Jewish education
Where?
at the Yiddish Volksschule.
Oh, okay. There
Yeah.
you go.
And Chaver, they referred to their friends as Chaver.
Mm-hmm.
Chaver Knaz was there as the music teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and Chaver Shapiro was the principal there. And it was a very good education. Learned Yiddish, learned Hebrew, know the alphabet. And it wasn't until later in life we had a book called The History of the Jews. And as I remember, the first chapter was on Abraham. Did I become aware that that was the Bible?
Uh-huh. Oh, they just called it the history of the Jews.
They didn't, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
cute. That's cute. I like that story.
Yeah.
I like that.
So I got my Jewish history.
You did. Well, it's
And
sort
I-
of like some of the Israeli, they know their Bible, but as their history, and that's what
And the same thing with songs. We learned Howard Knaus was a music teacher. He was very good.
Who was the Shapiro? What was his name? Do you remember?
Howard Shapiro.
I just wondered what family that was.
That was connected with the Yiddish Volksschule?
Yeah, You said
Was he a teacher there?
You said he was a principal.
Oh,
a few
Howard
minutes ago.
Shapiro. I hope I'm remembering the name correctly. I believe he's not from Milwaukee. No, he's not related to the Shapiros, who became, I think, Samson. No.
Yes,
Did they become Samson?
Sure,
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah. No, that was not the same family. He came from out of state.
So you had, and how old were you when you went to the Yiddish Volksschule?
Oh, I went there probably from the time I was 6 until I was about 13.
Okay.
And it was interesting. They were just starting bas mitzvahs for girls. My mother asked me if I wanted to have a bas mitzvah. I was a little shy, a little troubled. I said no. And to this day, so I'm thinking maybe
Well, you should have one.
that, now I belong to Temple Shalom.
A lot of them are doing it, aren't they?
And a year or two ago, I was at a group bat mitzvah for gals my age and a little bit younger, or maybe a little bit older. Yeah.
That might be something for you to do. Were you aware of anti-Semitism growing up, Harriet?
Not really. I do remember, though.
In school? Or?
I remember in high school, I had a Mrs. Rosenberg, and not Jewish, and maybe German, I don't know, who, when I raised my hand, she wanted to know who wasn't going to be there for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, those days. And she said to me, "Oh, I didn't know you were Jewish," you know. And that gave me a feeling of, well, I'm something different, or somewhat different. My mother, she was interested with the boys, because when I started being interested in boys, you know, it shouldn't be a non-Jewish boy, even at that early age, you know. And my mother came from a shtetl, and we moved to the west side when I was 3 years old, and we had Gentile neighbors upstairs, and we were very friendly with them, and I'd go up and see their Christmas tree.
Sure.
I came home from school one day, I remember, and I told my mother I wanted to have a stocking. Why not? You know,
Yeah,
and in
why
the
not?
morning there, and she says, "We don't do that." And I got it. I got the message. We don't do
Right,
that.
right.
But I didn't feel deprived, just, you know,
No, of course,
different.
Right. It's just
But to this day, I remember Mrs. Rosenberg saying,
interesting. That must have
"I
bothered
didn't
you
know
very
you were
much.
Jewish.
Something
It was,
about
what's the big deal, you
Right.
know?"
Something bothered you about that.
Yeah.
So you went to high school at, you went to Peckham, and then you went to Washington. Washington High School then was like the school. It was like the university school.
That's right.
I know that. And how was your high school life? Was it fun? Were you active? What were you active in?
To a certain degree, I belong. I had joined TOG, which was a Jewish sorority then.
Right, we have a lot of pictures here of TOG.
Oh, well, that's why I'm looking. I'm looking to see who I know there. But they sort of missed our generation.
Well, there are some that are put away, you know. That
I would imagine, because I've got some at home of
Yeah.
Sweet 16 parties and formal parties and so on. And that's probably where I made many of my friends, some that I still have to this day, although when I was in my early 20s, I moved to Los Angeles.
Why?
For the very reason that I left Milwaukee, I came back to Milwaukee.
You
When
left
I
to get
retired,
away from...
it was dull. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to get out. And I could have landed in New York, but
Yeah.
I think I was a little afraid of New York.
Boy, it took nerve for
Possibly.
you. You went to UW-Madison, you got a BA. When was that, when you were right out of high school?
Yeah, that was right out of high school.
And so you were a clinical social worker, you worked Jewish Family and Children's Service, 49 to 51. I'm looking at so you graduated high school, you went to Madison, you got your BA in social work, and then,
I thought I'd be a social worker, and I discovered I needed a master's degree to be a social worker. And my father had died right at that time. My brother was out of the home, so I stayed with my mother. But I was getting restless in Milwaukee. I got a job at Jewish Family and Children's Service, which I liked very much, but it was not a social work job. And I discovered I needed to go back and get my master's, which I did. It was in Milwaukee, because at that time Madison didn't have a graduate program.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, they came down. The instructors came down from Madison for us. But our field work was here in Milwaukee, so that...
Where did you conduct your field work?
Well, let's see. My first year was family service, and then my second year, and that was an eye-opener, was at the detention home on 11th Street, and things that I had never been exposed to.
Sure.
Teenage girls. Well, we would hear things about teenage girls that have had babies, but here they were right in front of me.
Yeah, it must have been kind of an eye-opener for you.
And homes. I went into the African-American neighborhood and into the homes, and homes that had holes in the ceiling, and not very pleasant, not very good.
So after you
Actually,
you got your master's, then did
Yeah.
you move to California?
I stayed for a year at the detention home, and that was interesting. It was a nice group of people there, and I learned a lot. I remember a youngster that was brought in after being physically abused by his father, and weeping, wanting to go back home. He didn't want to go anyplace else, which was an eye-opener for me. And I was always interested in people and new things and change. A restless person. And I settled in Los Angeles and made my life there. I was fortunate in getting jobs and advancing and so on. Eventually my brother moved out there, and I had an interesting life there.
What was interesting about it?
Well,
In addition to your work?
I had nobody looking over my shoulder,
I see.
kind of feeling. And when you're younger, that's great. When you're older, you miss it.
Yes.
You really do.
Yes.
I'm really not going to go into
That's fine.
any details.
Okay, that's good.
After all.
Right, exactly. So you, were you involved Jewishly when you lived in California, and how long did you live there? From how old to how old?
42 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
It is a long time.
Then what brought you back to Milwaukee? Because most of your relatives must be gone, certainly.
Not really.
No?
Not really.
Who's still here?
Well, my brother, who passed away last year, had come back to Milwaukee. And at that time, I was not happy in Los Angeles.
Okay.
I was no longer driving the freeways, which is a big handicap. I mean, you just don't get around. It takes you forever, you know. I got panicky one day, and I just never went back on. When I came back to Milwaukee, I didn't go on the expressways here either, Except during the winter, I began to realize that the expressways were often cleaner than some of the roads I was going
That's right.
on, better lit and safer. So
Right.
I'm driving the
Good
expressways
girl.
now
Good
here.
girl.
Well, there's no comparison. I mean, we have interchanges, 6, I don't know,
I can't
more
imagine.
lanes. I mean, you have to know what you're doing,
Right.
otherwise, and you move. I used to get upset with some of the drivers here because they'd hesitate before they make their move. I say, make your move, go, come on, and just, I see you,
Right. Were you involved in any of the Jewish community when you were in California, in any of the agencies, as a volunteer
No.
or synagogue or anything? Were you
No.
involved in the Jewish community? You weren't.
No, I wasn't.
You worked and.
I had Jewish friends, but I had non-Jewish friends also.
Mhm.
It's been quite a change
Because.
since I've been back to Milwaukee,
Yeah.
because socially, this was the way to go. And my two, let's see, I want to be fair to everybody, but institution-wise, I think my two main entryways were the Jewish Center
Here.
in
Yeah.
Milwaukee
Mhm.
programs.
Right.
Well, there's a third one. There was also Temple Shalom.
Mhm. And what's the third one?
So I'm learning about religion. It's very interesting.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, that's good.
It's very. I'm still agnostic, but because I was brought up without the belief, and it's hard. It's
Sure.
hard to change. And I don't believe it's fair even to blame God for what happens to one. I think a lot of what happens to us is our decisions, free will, so to speak. Well, that's part of the Jewish belief to a certain degree.
I think so.
And then the third one was Jewish organizations like Naamat and Hadassah.
Good.
And so it took a while.
How long are you back?
It's 8 years,
Oh.
the end of September,
Oh,
now,
Mhm.
right now.
Mhm. Mhm. What?
I do want to tell you
Okay.
that one of the things I did do that opened some doors for me also was volunteering.
Mhm. Always, they say that. Always.
Yes, so I volunteered here at the
Mhm.
archives
Mhm.
for a while, and then I got restless.
Mhm.
And I volunteered for several years at the Art Museum. I volunteered for a while at the Jewish Home. That was an interesting experience for me because my mother died while she was at the Jewish Home.
Mhm.
So I remember the first time I went back without a thought or anything. I opened the door and my eyes filled up with tears.
Yeah, isn't it funny how that happens to us about our mothers?
I'm
Yes.
not the only one.
Oh no, not at all. Not at all. My mother's gone a long time. But tell me something. What are you most proud of for your? If you could say, I am proud that I have my things, and everybody. What are you most proud of,
I
Harriet?
think this is very important, especially when you get older,
Yeah.
to feel what has one accomplished
Mhm.
in their life. It's really my work. So much of my activities, even my social life, I used to go to conferences and so on, here and internationally also,
Mhm.
is I really feel through my work that I've made a difference, sometimes an important difference in someone's life.
It's a wonderful accomplishment.
Thank you.
It is.
I really enjoy helping people. I like it. But I find now, as I'm getting older, a couple things. One is I'm slowing down, but other people are slowing down too. And I'm able to drive at night, I'm able to do various things, and I find that some friends, that's one thing. You'll do anything for a friend, but acquaintances are with walkers, don't drive at night, and suddenly you're the one that's, if you're able and you're offering, you're the one that's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it puts me in a dilemma sometimes. But I do have medical problems, so I use that. But it's hard for me. It's very hard
Sometimes
for me.
we have to protect ourselves too, don't you think?
I wish I didn't have to, but I
think
find
so.
myself that it's a choice, and I'm learning. It's interesting how one continues, if they want to, continues learning as we grow older.
Well, sounds
It's
like
it's a good time.
yes,
It's
it
a
is.
good
You have time. You have time to take to learn.
That's right.
How would you like to be remembered?
How would I like to be remembered?
Mhm.
You know, I've often thought about that.
What
There
makes,
are records of my work. I don't know if they're kept or not. You know, now they've shortened records a lot. As a fine companion, as a good friend, with certain people, as a loving person, you know, someone that it's enjoyable or pleasant to be around.
That's good.
Simple, very, very simple, actually. You know, my brother died recently, and he was a bachelor, and he left bequests to various groups, including and two professors' names at the University of Wisconsin in Madison Engineering School that he remembered. And we're in the process of defining how we want the money used. And my brother would be the type, he left it in their names, who didn't care about his own name. He just felt, he was a private person. And I'm still debating that. My feeling is, I think I would like my name on something.
Good for you. Good for you.
So with all
I like
this,
your honesty. That's nice.
well, in a profession like mine, it helps. It helps, you know.
Right. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't get to?
Well, I didn't think I was doing anything. I didn't prepare. I think that you did a pretty good job.
I did a pretty good job.
pretty
Well,
much,
there's something else. Now's the time.
Now I know. I'll think of it tonight.
Yeah, well, you're like everybody else. Every single one of our interviewees goes home and says,
Human nature. You never cover everything.
Of course
that
you
you
don't.
would like to say.
Of course you don't.
I have to, for the record, I have to say that I appreciate my parents much, much more now than I did at other times in my life. And also with my sib, you know, my brother. And why is it we appreciate people more often when they're gone?
Yeah, it's too bad, isn't it? Because
It's
we
interesting.
can't get them back. Well, you're a social worker. You should tell me. Why don't you tell us? That'll be your
can't.
legacy.
I
Well,
can't
thank you.
social work myself.
Yeah, it's a good. It's like
Thank you, Kathy.
yeah. Thanks
also.
for taking the time and that it worked out well for us. And
Good.
I appreciate it.
Good.
By the way, it's interesting. My husband.